Well, right now, a judge just delaying the trial of two now 13-year-olds accused of trying to kill a classmate to please a fictional character known as Slender Man. We've been covering this case really since it first broke. The Wisconsin girls are right now being charged as adults, but the case is on hold while an appeals court decides whether or not it should actually be handled in juvenile court. John Spilborn back with us, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Dan Schorr, a former prosecutor. So Dan, explain exactly what's going on here, because it seemed like this case was on track to go to trial in October.
Right. They were two 12-year-old girls. They were accused of stabbing another 12-year-old girl 19 times, leaving her to die. And the judge ruled that he was going to keep it in the adult regular court system where they're charged with attempted first-degree murder. The defendants are now appealing that to an appeals court. They want to move it to juvenile court, which would mean that they'd go in front of a juvenile judge, and at most they could be sentenced till they're 18 years old.
At most.
At most. And they're 13 now, so they would get out in 5 years at most, and there would be no jurisdiction of the court system over them. If they stayed in the adult system, they could get up to 65 years in prison. So tremendous change in their exposure depending on what happens here.
John, we already had one judge rule that it was going to be an adult case. So what is the likelihood that we get a different ruling here?
Well, the interesting thing in Wisconsin, it's automatic if you're over a certain age based on a certain crime that you're going to be tried in adult court, and it will only be reverted if successful. So will an appeals court look at this and say, you know what, I think we should? It's a possibility. Here's what bothers me about this case, and I'm bothered by Wisconsin law to begin with, but the problem is this isn't an issue of guilt or innocence. These girls are clearly guilty. The facts are there. They're guilty. The issue is, should they be legally responsible based on their very young age and or the fact that they have some mental issues going on here?
We do have one doctor weighing in on one of the girls, saying that she had a very early form of schizophrenia. We don't have the same diagnosis for the other girl, and we know that those diagnoses, of course, are challenged in court. Dan, what do you think is the appropriate way forward?
I think it should be in an adult court, because this is an unusual case. It's unusual to have girls this young in an adult court, but they planned out the stabbing. They lured another girl into the woods, and to appease this fictional character, Slender Man, they stabbed her 19 times, and she crawled out almost dead, and a bystander found her and saved her. Now, as far as the mental issues, it's hard to make out an insanity defense here because it's such a planned out, thought out crime, and that's inconsistent with what we usually see in an insanity defense, where someone just doesn't realize what's happening, doesn't appreciate what they're doing. Here they knew what they were doing if the facts alleged are true.
They knew what they were doing, John, but then the argument is they were so young. They're 12.
Right.
So what do you think is actually the stronger argument for the defense? The fact that they or one is insane,
right,
or that they just were kind of hypnotized by this strange fictional character that, quite frankly, we know amongst young adults has produced sort of this weird following?
I think it's both. I think they have a 1-2 punch available to them in their defense, because at 13, look, what were we? At 13, I was, rollerblading, didn't have a care in the world. But are kids that young easily impressed by these weird fictional characters? Sure. If they were 23 and this happened, we wouldn't be having this argument, obviously. But they're children. They are absolutely children.
But then let me ask you about the punishment that Dan also mapped out. If they stay in the juvenile system, then they're really only held until they're 18, and that, for the first-degree murder charge, seems like not the fair ruling.
Well, look at it this way, though. In juvenile court, it's designed to give treatment to juveniles with the hope that they can be rehabilitated later on down the road. You throw 13-year-olds in an adult system where they're not going to get that kind of treatment, then they're going to be in that system for the rest of their lives.
Well, that is the argument, Dan. The other argument is, if they stay in this juvenile system, if one of the girls indeed does have a mental illness, she's actually not going to get the treatment that she needs in the same way as if she was in the adult system.
Clearly, both of them are not mentally well adjusted, because they wouldn't have done something like this. The problem is, it's not just about the two defendants, it's about the public safety threat that they pose. You have these two girls who decided to plan out this calculated murder. Fortunately, it turned out to be an attempted murder, not a murder. But if they're out and free in 5 years at age 18, where does that leave the society around them? So that's a reason to prosecute them in adult court.
From what you see, Jonna, is this something that the girls are going to have to take the stand for wherever they are, whether they're in juvenile court or adult court?
See, I see this completely differently, and I spent a lot of time practicing in juvenile court. We don't need to try this case on the facts. We really don't. The facts are there. Where we do want to hear from the girls is, are they remorseful? Do they get it now and they didn't get it a year ago? How did this come to pass to begin with? So I want to hear from them and their parents, but not on the issue of guilt or innocence, on the issue of remorse and rehabilitation.
Quick final thought, Dan?
They could say they're remorseful, but they stabbed someone 19 times. They calculated it. They planned it. It's very scary that they might be released in a few years.
We'll see what happens. So again, appeals court, and we'll see where it goes from here. Nice to have you both. Thank you very much.